Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultants channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. And in this video I just want to take another look from a different angle at this cult of Minnesota nice that I've discussed so many times on my YouTube channel already. This one I entitle Minnesota Nice, the End of Civilization, because I'm going to look at how they voted in the election, and we're going to see what it is exactly that Minnesotans voted for. Now keep in mind, Minnesotans, Minnesota Nice, the cult of Minnesota Nice is this group of people who say they are the nicest, kindest, most neighborly, most charitable. Just pull all the good words out of the dictionary and they say that that's us, out of all the country. Which, of course, implicitly implies that everyone else in the country, like you, for example, are less than they are. You're not as nice, you're not as kind, you're not as charitable, you're not as smart, you're not as well educated, you're not as... pull all the words out of the dictionary, all the good words. That's the cult of Minnesota Nice. It's the only state in the country that sells itself as being superior, basically. Creates and maintains this myth of Minnesota Nice. Now, as you've seen through my YouTube videos, they're anything but. They're quite the opposite, which is exactly what psychopaths do. They project one, it's always, you hear about the guy who cut up his family, set him on fire and ate him for dinner and stuff, and everyone out there saying, well, he looked alright to me, he seemed like a really nice guy. Things like that. That's the cult of Minnesota Nice. That's why I ended up living in a car when it shouldn't have happened in the first place. That's why I have remained living in a car for so many years when it never should have happened. So, just kind of briefly here, I just want to go over not details of how they voted. I put up a video about a more local U.S. representative election with Angie Craig and, Tyler, and she won re-election. Now, the one thing I would note before I start is this. If you've wondered over the last several years, such as the midterm elections when Trump won, if at that time, when all those Democrats won across the country, you were just thinking like, what? What is going on? This makes no rational sense. There's this huge movement toward electing representatives who actually look after the people instead of looking after themselves and huge corporations and agendas and, what you might call a new world order or something like that. There's a movement toward politicians who actually care something about us, the rabble. And yet, all these Democrats won election. And if in the midterms at that time, if you just thought this doesn't make any sense, are there really this many stupid people in America or not? Well, the last election, the presidential election, given what happened there, I think helps to explain what happened in the midterm elections and many of the previous elections going all the way back until the day when I, as a former computer scientist, raised my hand and said, electronic voting what? When they said that they were going to go to electronic voting machines, because as a computer scientist, I knew exactly what that meant from day one. Bad idea. In other words, your vote no longer mattered at all. Someone else could, not saying they would or did, but they could determine your vote no matter how you voted, and that was the first time that had ever happened. And I knew we were headed in a really scary direction way back then. So if you're wondering how all these lunatics got into office, these people who support the things I'm going to show you here, when there was an obvious huge wave of a movement toward the other direction, you might consider the possibility that something like that has been going on for a long, long time, not just in the election a couple months ago. Having said that, I want to just point out that if you look at a map of the United States and you look at the blue and the red in this election, not this election because there's so much being contested, but generally the way over the last several years, couple decades, that the country has voted. For what it's worth, not exactly, but for what it's worth, the center is blue, the middle America, the salt of the earth, down down-home people, the people who don't have these big-headed pretenses. They're not on Wall Street. They're not in Hollywood. They're just ordinary good folks. They tend to vote red, right? That's going to be Republican. The blue is on the edges, on the coast for the most part. New York, which I think if you look at New York lately, you see how sane that place is. Massachusetts, New Jersey, that whole region, eastern seaboard. And then the West Coast, which was just California that went off the intellectual and psychological deep end a long time ago. But as they destroyed their state, their people moved away, and they moved to places like Oregon and Washington and Colorado in particular. Remember, I did that project where I was traveling the entire country for about 10 years. And that's one of the things I heard, especially in Colorado and Washington in particular, was all these Californians moved in here because they destroyed California, and then they immediately ran for public office and they destroyed our state. So if you look at the map, what do you see? You see all this red in the center of America except for three places. You see blue in Colorado, in Illinois, which is Chicago, not the whole state. You got this big state of Illinois. There's this big city down there, Illinois, Chicago. That turns, just that one city turns that whole state blue. And then Minnesota. Now, Colorado, it's easy to understand. All the Californians moved in there and took it over, just like they did with Washington. Chicago, it's easy to understand. Have you ever gone to Chicago? Have you ever gone to downtown Chicago? I have. Have you ever tried to talk to the people who live like in the downtown, the masses of Chicago? Yo, brother, what's up? Homie, we're gonna... That's what you're dealing with, okay? It's not a big surprise that their vote is not based on intelligence and wisdom in Chicago. And Chicago determines what Illinois votes for. But what about Minnesota? This lonely state right in the center of the country. It claims to be the most well-educated, the smartest, the nicest, the kindest, the most charitable, and yet they consistently keep voting blue. Just like the East and West Coasts, and just like the Colorado that's taken over by Californians, and this completely now uneducated jungle, this uncivilized jungle of Chicago, which is just a mess. It's just a total mess. I mean, the shootings there, everything. Look at their mayor. Just look at what's going on in Chicago. Those are understandable, but what's going on with Minnesota? Why is Minnesota by itself always blue? Now, they would say there was no voter fraud at all in this last election. So that means that when they voted blue, they voted Democrat. That's exactly what they intended to happen. Minnesotans, the members of this, what I'm describing as a cult of Minnesota nice, they wanted these Democrat candidates in office, like Angie Craig. They wanted that. And you got to ask the burning question, why would they want something so damaging when all of the people around them throughout the whole Midwest don't want anything to do with it? In fact, they're fighting here 2 months later after the election. They're fighting to try to set that election straight. But not Minnesota. They voted blue. They just accepted it. There weren't even any claims of voter fraud. Just nothing at all. This is how we voted. This is the way it is. This is what we want. Well, let's see what it is that they want. What they want, and I'm going to focus on the presidency because there's no point going any deeper. It translates all the way down to Angie Craig's office and everything else. Joe Biden. Now, you have to look up Joe Biden, and you have to look him up in sources that are not being censored today, because all big tech is censoring everything today, so that, you can only believe in something to the extent that you have any knowledge or awareness of the issue in the first place. If you don't know everything about an issue, you can't really come to a rational belief or an opinion about it. You're going to be skewed by other people who determine what it is that you hear. For example, these people who only watch CNN for the last 5 years. If all they hear is CNN saying that Donald Trump is a racist, if that's all they hear and they don't actually look anywhere else for any evidence, well, they're going to come to an obvious belief that Donald Trump is a racist, even though any objective evaluation of that particular question is entirely the opposite. Not just the opposite, but it's not just that he isn't a racist, it's that he actively takes care of people of other races. Very, very well. Better than his predecessors in office did. But you have to know where to look to see that. You have to look at the man, not what CNN says. who hates Trump. Well, any objective look at Biden outside of the context of those who are controlling information will show you that this guy is corrupt to the core. The mainstream media itself, the very people who are pitching Joe Biden today, they have videos on YouTube. The same news services have videos about Joe Biden throughout his whole 47-year career, and they're never flattering. They're always about scandals. They're always about bad things he did, like when he plagiarized all these other good speakers around the world, and he just stole their speeches. He stole that one from the guy in England, and he got busted every time. He stole from Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and he presents it as his own words. And then when he gets caught, he just blows it off. Oh, I made a mistake. You made a mistake? How do you make a mistake by copying someone else's speech and not attributing it to them? The whole thing about this tendency of Joe Biden to touch women when they don't want to be touched, especially very small, young women who fit into a category that we describe for human beings who are not very old yet. What about all that? All the pictures, all the videos you can see, those videos and pictures were being shown when Obama was president. This isn't something that was manufactured for the 2020 election. People have been talking about Joe Biden's tendency to touch and sniff young girls for a long, long, long time. And there's more to it if you look into it. I'm not going there. That's who the state of Minnesota voted for president of the United States. And I want to make it clear. Minnesota, no, not even accusations of voter fraud in Minnesota. That means Minnesotans, not Wisconsinites, not North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska. No one else. Minnesota, for some reason, that one group of people wanted a guy who's known for touching young girls when they don't want to be touched, and older women as well, and sniffing them. Let's look at what Biden has said he's going to do, if you can understand anything he says, because he clearly is in the early stages of dementia. So it isn't just what he says he's going to do, it's what his handlers say is going to happen. Biden, of course, sometimes things are so obvious you don't even need to really explain it. It's just obvious. This guy isn't going to be there long, right? So Harris is going to be president probably very shortly after an inauguration, if Biden is inaugurated on January 20. So if you look at what Harris has said she will do, and you look at what Biden says he's going to do, and you look at what their handlers, the people who actually control them from above, pull the strings, they're very consistent. So it doesn't really matter. But this is what they say they're going to do. First of all, they're going to restore the Iran agreement. In the Iran agreement, okay, I talk about in my videos about somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million human beings, American citizens, who live like I do, homeless. And the whole system is set up to just completely disenfranchise them and keep them outside of normal society so that they can't build their way out. And then the propaganda portrays them all as just a bunch of complete losers. It's your fault, blame the victim, so that they can't get assistance or help from anybody. So it's just destroying all those people. Yet what Obama did instead was he took billions of dollars in cash. Cash. If we use cash, the IRS is looking at us. If we use cash, the Department of Homeland Security is looking at us. But they sent a plane load of cash, more than I think it was like $3 billion, to Iran as part of this Iran agreement, and gave them cash. Cash is very easy to spend for things that you don't want to be traced, like, terrorism, for example. Gee, what a coincidence, because Iran is known as the biggest national sponsor of terrorism in the world. And Obama sent billions of dollars of our money over to Iran on an airplane in cash. And terrorism went after that. Gee, maybe there's a connection there. Also, if you look at the terms of this, it was designed to help make sure that Iran can get a nuclear bomb. The terms of so-called monitoring their nuclear program and everything, things like, we have to give you a certain number of days notice, which means you can go hide all the stuff you don't want inspectors to see. The fact that you can set up shop in a mountain over here, and as long as you don't declare it in this place, we'll never inspect it in the first place. In other words, the whole Iran agreement was set up to help Iran get a nuclear bomb, the largest state sponsor of terror in the world, but a Muslim sponsor of terror. Remember, this was Obama who did this, and Joe Biden on his leash just followed along. Biden says he's going to restore that. Donald Trump took it and cut it immediately as soon as he became president. And Iran has struggled and suffered ever since. Iran is to the point where those evil leaders who are oppressing all their wonderful people in Iran, I mean, the Iranian people have always traditionally been just wonderful, wonderful people. But these lunatic religious leaders in charge, these terrorist leaders in charge of Iran, they are this close to being overthrown by their people, except for one thing. They're counting on Biden becoming president. The Iranian leaders have made it clear they want Joe Biden as president. Why would they want Biden as president? Why wouldn't they want Trump as president? Why would they want to make sure Trump doesn't win? Maybe it's because he's stopping the greatest national sponsor of terror in the world, and he's not sending them cash free of charge. Money that is not being spent on America's 4 million homeless people. It's being spent on terrorists. That's what Joe Biden wants to do, is reestablish that Iran agreement. If you look at the leaders of Iran, they are among the very most insane of these radical Muslim leaders. They feel it is their job, if necessary, to destroy the entire world, to usher in their Mahdi, their version of the Messiah. They have to create so much chaos that he has to come and save them. Okay, if the world isn't in absolute chaos and terror and fear, he's not going to come. They have to do that. So you can bet that the moment they get a nuclear bomb working, they're going to put it atop a missile and send it over to Tel Aviv. And if that ain't going to start World War III, folks, I don't know what will. But that's what Joe Biden wants to do. And Minnesotans voted for Joe Biden. They wanted him to be president. They wanted, by extension, Iran to have a nuclear weapon. They wanted to make sure that it didn't reach the boiling point where the people, the good people of Iran, overthrew these evil monsters who have been tyrannizing them for, 40 years now. That's what Minnesotans wanted. What else did Minnesotans want? Well, if you look at the last 4 years, have you heard of a whole lot of terrorism going on in the world, especially in American interests? Not nearly as much as there was before, was there? If nothing else, terrorists, I don't want to say they're smart, because being a terrorist obviously makes you really, really dumb. But you can be dumb and smart at the same time. In other words, you can be dumb and stupid. You can be stupid and smart at the same time. Let me put it that way. You can be able to kind of be clever and street smart and get around the system and still be mind-bogglingly stupid, which is what these terrorists are. They know all they have to do is wait until Trump's gone, and then they can go back to business. So if Joe Biden is elected president on January 20th, you can expect that somewhere around, I don't know, maybe if he's inaugurated at 10 a.m., maybe around noon, you can start seeing the world terrorism fire up again. Because no one's going to do anything about it. Obama did nothing about it. He helped to build ISIS, or ISIL, or whatever you want to call them. He helped to build them into what they were, while calling them the JV team. The JV team that did more damage than pretty much anyone else, including Al-Qaeda. That's what Minnesotans voted for. They wanted it. There was no election fraud. They wanted that in office. They wanted a return to world terrorism that Trump had almost single-handedly stopped, because they knew if you start, even look at this Soleimani, the general from Iran, he was planning these kinds of things, and we knew it. And what did we do? We took him out before he could actually perpetrate any of these attacks. So the attacks didn't happen. There's only been these little here and there attacks the last 4 years. That's about to stop, thanks in part to the people of Minnesota. The nicest, kindest, most friendly, most neighborly, smartest, most well-educated people in the country. Not you, them. By their own words, that's what they say about themselves. How about this? Israel, peace agreements. This has been like the litmus test for a president for as long as I've been alive. Who can bring peace to the Middle East? People who live in Israel is about the size of New Jersey. It's very, very small. You can just drive across it in a couple hours. You have the main city of Jerusalem, which is, for political reasons, kind of split between the Jews and the Arabs, the Muslims. And then you have Tel Aviv and a couple other small, medium-sized cities. But this is not a huge, huge country, and yet the whole world's against it, especially all the Muslims who own all the land. If you look at a map of the world, they own all of North Africa, the whole Arabian Peninsula, all the way into Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, the satellite states of the former Soviet Union. They own this huge chunk, like 1/4 of the landmass on Earth, and they're worried about this tiny, itty-bitty little bit called Israel, the size of New Jersey. Because all that isn't enough for them. They've got to have that little spot there. It's because they want the Jews to die, the same thing that Adolf Hitler wanted. The people who live in Israel, bless their hearts, have to live where sirens go off as if it were the Battle of Britain in World War II. Throughout their whole lives, a siren could go off, and they have a matter of a couple of minutes to get to a bomb shelter. Because the Palestinians lob these missiles. Lebanon, Hezbollah, they lob these missiles. Out of nowhere, these missiles come over there. Or they send over a kite over the border, and they start a fire in a field and burn their agriculture. They're just under attack all the time by these insane lunatics. These Palestinians, Hezbollah, the PLO, all of whom are ultimately funded by Iran, the one that Joe Biden wants to put back on a pedestal and give them a nuclear bomb. For the last 4 years, the people of Israel have lived more peacefully than probably anyone in Israel's entire existence since they became a nation again in 1948, because of Donald Trump. The people of Minnesota just voted for a return to those people in Israel who are just minding their own business, just living ordinary lives like we are. The people of Minnesota voted for a return to Israel, having to look over their shoulder at all times. Is there somebody behind me with a sword? Is there somebody at this bus stop who's going to blow himself up? Is there somebody behind the wheel of that car who's going to drive through this crowd? Is there somebody over there setting off a missile that could hit any house in Israel? That's what the people of Minnesota voted for. Because as soon as Joe Biden takes office, those people are now free to start attacking Israel on a daily basis again. But they were too terrified to do it when Trump was president. But that's what the people of Minnesota want. They want the people of Israel to live in fear and terror and to be harmed by evil people. That's how they voted. That's how they voted. The whole state, the whole Midwest is red, except for Chicago and Colorado, and there's Minnesota, blue. Joe Biden says he's immediately going to go back into the Paris Accord for climate change. If you look at my, 8-part series on junk science, you'll find out what climate change is all about. It ain't about changing climate. The climate changes, folks, that's just kind of the way the world works. Climate change is junk science. It is institutionalized fraud. It is a means of control. Just like this coronavirus scare, there is a disease, but the scare and the shutdowns and the masks and all that nonsense is part of a control system. It has nothing to do with the virus itself. Nothing. So is climate change. Donald Trump took us out of it immediately. Not because he's against science, but because he's for science. Climate change, man-made climate change, is junk science. Joe Biden wants to put us back into that. So all these control mechanisms, all these abilities for foreign unelected bodies to dictate the terms of existence for American citizens, for example, that's what Minnesotans just voted for when they voted for Joe Biden. That's what it's going to return to. All our autonomy, gone. All right, how about all this idiotic unrest and violence in the United States over the last year? And hey, what do you know? It started in Minnesota, didn't it? It started here in Minnesota. And keep in mind, in Minnesota, which is a very large state by landmass, at least 60% of the population is in the Twin Cities, St. Paul and Minneapolis. And so that's 60% of the population. That's where most everything is. You've got a city up there in Duluth and down in Rochester, but otherwise it's small towns across Minnesota. And keep in mind that the people in those other places in Minnesota seem to be more normal. They're not enmeshed part of this cult of Minnesota Nice that runs Minnesota. But the problem is, because of that huge population base in St. Paul, Minneapolis, they control everything. They control all the politics, they control the laws, they control everything. And it's that group of insane cultists, Minnesota Nice, who are Minnesota in the sense. So please, if you live up in the Iron Range or something, I'm not necessarily talking about you. There's some overlap in there, but I mean, this even overlaps into western Wisconsin. It's a regional thing. It isn't just defined by the state borders. But Minneapolis-St. Paul is the core of this Minnesota Nice cult, and that's where the bulk of the population is. So this George Floyd nonsense and rioting started in the Twin Cities. Right there, right smack in the epicenter of this little tiny area out of all of Minnesota that controls what Minnesota is, that is responsible for this evil cult, the one that made me homeless and keeps me homeless, among its countless other crimes against humanity. What happened when those riots started? What did Governor Walz do? What did that floppy-haired leader of Minneapolis do? Nothing. Nothing that a leader would do, anyway. I mean, a real leader. They just sat back, blah, 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 blah. This is unusual, I don't know what to do about it. And then they started tinkering in their mind, thinking like, well, what's the political advantage of letting this go on? You know, while someone's business is burning to the ground and this person over here is being shot dead, they're sitting there thinking, well, can this be to our advantage? Can this work for the election? Will this help get Biden elected? And they're sitting there thinking all these machinations in their mind while all this violence is out there, and the people around there are increasingly getting terrified to even sleep inside their own homes. That's Minnesota Nice, the cult of Minnesota Nice, and that's why they did nothing. And when they did that, they set the precedent for how state governments are going to respond to this kind of violence. Where did it pop up next? Seattle with Chaz, Oregon, and what was the response? It was based on the response that was set, the precedent was set by Minnesota. Do nothing about it. Let it go on indefinitely. Do nothing to stop it. Let these people take over, let these American domestic terrorists come in and take over and disrupt our society and terrorize the people. That's the precedent that Governor Walz and this floppy-haired guy in Minneapolis and all these others, the city council in Minneapolis, who wanted to defund the police. Remember all that stupidity last year? That came out of Minnesota. That's where that came from. And it spread across this nation like a cancer. Those people voted for Joe Biden, the guy who refused to condemn that kind of violence and stupidity. And if you just look at what he says and what he does, he ain't going to do nothing about it either. Donald Trump did everything he could to stop it, shy of coming in and overpowering the states, which you're not supposed to do as the President of the United States. In other words, he did the right thing. He kept his power as president where it should be. He could have tried something. He could have tried doing something that a president's really never done before and go in and overpower a state with the military to bring about domestic order. And it would have been a good thing temporarily if he had, but it would have been a bad thing in the long run because of the precedent he would have set. He resisted the urge to do that, and he tried using everything he had to get these lunatic leaders, these Democrat leaders, to do the right thing. But they refused. Joe Biden, it's just going to go back to free-for-all. Defund the police. You want the police? Sorry, we defunded them. Is there someone with a gun there? Is there someone in bed with your little daughter? You got another guy standing pointing a gun at you while that guy's in bed with your little daughter, raping her? Sorry, we don't have any police for you. Governor Walz didn't want it. The leaders of Minnesota didn't want it, and they set the precedent for what's going on everywhere else in the country now. Those people, Minnesotans, voted for that when they voted for Joe Biden. How about big tech censoring? Big tech, Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, all these big tech companies censoring the information that you receive. Wasn't it just a short time ago in this video that I said you can only come to a rational belief or opinion or attitude towards something to the extent that you have knowledge about that in the first place? If the only thing you've heard is that Donald Trump is racist, you will believe that Donald Trump is racist, even if Donald Trump in the real world isn't the slightest bit racist, right? If you believe that Iran is a great benefactor of humanity, because that's the only thing you've heard on CNN, you will believe that. When the reality is that they are the greatest sponsor of terror and murder, state sponsor, in the world. And they want a nuclear bomb, and they want a nuclear bomb so that they can use that bomb 10 minutes after it goes active to bring in their Mahdi. That's who Minnesota voted for. Big tech censoring these YouTube videos, saying that we are not going to allow anybody to talk about election skullduggery that led to different results than if that skullduggery hadn't been committed. And by skullduggery, I'm talking about acts of criminality that normally, when big tech doesn't censor it and stand up for the criminals, they would be prosecuted at the highest levels of our justice system. And by highest levels, I'm talking about the very worst crimes that are committable in our society, the ones that lead to capital punishment. That is what this bearded, creepy-looking guy from Twitter, that's what Zuckerberg, that pale little Zuckerberg, all these tech leaders, that's what they are defending and standing up for. That's why YouTube videos are being censored. That's why people who speak the truth on YouTube are being kicked off YouTube and not having their videos there. That's what Minnesota voted for, was more of that, so that you can never learn the truth. What about Section 230? Section 230 is that part that was put in by, because big tech is all buddy-buddy with the swamp in Washington. Section 230 is what protects Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google from being sued into poverty for doing exactly what I just mentioned, which, again, remember, it's part of a conspiratorial crime that is the worst crime that can be committed in a nation from a national security perspective. It's punishable by capital punishment. Section 230 protects only Google and Facebook and YouTube. It doesn't protect me. If I go out and I commit, say, treason against the United States of America, guess what? I would be prosecuted for treason and I would receive the punishment due, which is capital punishment. If they do it, there's nothing. You can't even prosecute them because of Section 230. Can you guess which candidate for president in the 2020 election was trying to get rid of Section 230? It was the incumbent. It was the president in office right now, Donald Trump. Mr. Biden couldn't care less. He likes that because big tech serves his agenda and they support what he's doing. Not what he's doing, because he's not doing anything on his own, what his handlers are doing. They're all part of the same big cabal. But how are you going to know that when Section 230 prevents people like me from telling you the details of it? What about this coronavirus health scare? There's a real virus out there. It really is dangerous to some people. In other words, if you're old and if you have pre-existing conditions, it can be very dangerous for you. Just like the flu. Just like the flu can kill an otherwise healthy person who might have a pre-existing condition of any age. And if you look at the details of what coronavirus is versus that flu, I urge you to do so. Let me put it that way, because thanks to Section 230, I can't tell you exactly what's going on here. But maybe you can infer it from the tone of my voice or something. Or maybe you could do some research and find out that everything that's been done over the last year never had to be done, and it was never done for something that's almost identical to it, called the flu. There was another reason for it. Donald Trump has done everything he can to stop that, to preserve our liberty, and to stop health fascism, one of my existential threats to America, from being used as a means for this criminal cabal to take over, take away our freedoms. What has happened through the coronavirus health scare? They have destroyed the church. The Christian church has ceased to exist. They can't gather together anymore. This is stuff that happened in the Middle Ages, folks. Persecuting the church? When I was a kid, I would read about that in the books, and I would just think, like, what kind of primitive, three-toed reptiles were these? They're persecuting a church because you disagree with their beliefs? I mean, what kind of low-level humanity would do something like that? And here we are in the year 2020, and they're persecuting the Christian church. Supposedly for stopping coronavirus. defining this person as essential and that person as non-essential. And guess what? You probably fall under the non-essential. What government has ever in history defined this person as essential and non-essential and not eventually taken that to the extreme where the non-essentials are just gotten rid of because they're, oh, I don't know, not essential? Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota took it upon himself to declare me as non-essential. But he was essential. Isn't that interesting? Minnesotans voted for a continuation of that indefinitely. Indefinitely. As in never to stop. Ever. Wearing masks forever. Never knowing what the people out there you see on the street look like. Never seeing their face, which is how you determine, it's your first line of defense, like your immune system. Seeing someone's face is the first line of defense in trying to figure out what kind of a person that is. Can I trust them? You can't see their faces because they're all wearing masks. Destroying small businesses so that companies can stay open, these huge companies like Target and Best Buy and Walmart. Supporting big pharmacy, one of the most evil industries on the face of the earth. And this isn't about vaccines, their efficacy and that kind of thing. Big pharmacy, you got to go back to my junk science videos and how they are the ones who turned this 500-year-old hate group, these anti-smokers, into the most powerful and wealthy hate group in the world today. And in the process, the anti-smokers wrote the playbook that works. Look at what's happened to smokers. Look what's happened to the opinion of smoking out there in the last 30 years. They wrote that playbook. All you have to do is go in there, use a search and replace on your computer, replace smoking with climate change. Replace smoking with coronavirus. It's the exact same playbook. And you can see how successful they were using it against smokers. They are just as successful using it for any other purpose they fill in the blank with. That was underwritten by Big Pharmacy, who wanted to take all the business away from the tobacco industry. Destroy the Constitution. The Constitution is as good as dead already because of people like Governor Tim Walz, who have violated that Constitution, and all the people in our judicial system who have failed to prosecute and punish people like Governor Tim Walz in the manner that they should be prosecuted and punished according to the Constitution. Governor Tim Walz should be suffering the same fate as the Rosenbergs. And instead, the man's walking more free than you or I. Same thing for Governor Newsom in California. He's out there partying without a mask hours after telling all Californians they have to wear a mask or else you will feel the boot of our militarized police force. Even though over here we're saying defund the police. But we have our own police, you see, the secret police. We have our own. You see where this is going. That came from coronavirus. This was all about stopping a virus, right? That's all it was about. Nothing else. No other purpose. What about ending our children's educations? Completely just stopping it so that they become even dumber. Our education system, one of my existential threats to America, was already dumbing this population down to the point of just total impotence as citizens. And now, for the last year, these kids haven't had any education at all. What's the purpose of that? Why would you want to do that? Think about it. There are reasons why you would want to do that. Dumb people are easy to control. I'll just leave it at that. What about using vaccines as an offensive weapon against human beings? Not against viruses, but using a vaccine as an offensive weapon against people. You will take the vaccine or else you will not be able to participate in society. Look around. I mean, you're not hearing it on CNN and all these, but go out and find the real news and find what's really happening. You might look to the UK is a good example because word's getting out there better than other places. But it's here in the States as well. Leaders of the United Kingdom have come right out and said, if you don't take the vaccine, your life is going to change. Your life is going to fundamentally change. You are going to be restricted to the point where you basically will never leave your home for the rest of your life. In other words, you're going to be, if you don't take the vaccine, your life is over. And these are leaders of the UK just coming out and saying it. If you don't take the vaccine, then your life effectively it's over. It's done with. And they're okay with that. They're okay with that. They think that makes rational sense. Don't forget, if a vaccine works, if there's a room of 10 people, including me, and the other 9 people take the vaccine, and the vaccine actually works, then who cares whether I took the vaccine or not? Because they can't get sick, right? The vaccine supposedly protects them from it. Unless, of course, the vaccine doesn't work in the first place. And it has a different purpose in our society than to protect people's health. Such as being weaponized as an offensive weapon against human beings. All of this, which has been perpetrated by Democrats for the last year, is what the people of Minnesota voted for. That's what they want. They want that to be what's going on in our society. They want that to be the direction that the entire world goes in the future, indefinitely. They proved that they want that because they voted blue. They voted for Biden. How about this one? Have you heard about the Pakistani leader who called... Remember, I don't know if you heard of... You probably didn't... Well, I don't know what you've heard of, because if you're listening to mainstream media, you don't know anything that's going on in the world. So... Excuse me, it is freezing cold. I mean, this window here is already fogged up. You can't even see out it. And I have no defogger or heat in this car. Great. A while back, there were these beheadings in France, because France had this open-door immigration policy. Come on in! And they let all the Muslims in. Well, in an effort to actually have real free speech, they did or said something that Muslims didn't like, something to do with the Prophet Muhammad and those cartoons, and they started sawing off the heads of teachers. Do you know your kid's teacher, at least when we had schools before the coronavirus scam? Did you know your children's teacher? How would you like the idea of one of these immigrants, they call them immigrants, coming into our country, going onto the school bus, grabbing them by the head, and sawing their head off in front of the kids? Is that what you want? Because that's what Minnesotans want. They just voted for the guy who does nothing about that, and in fact, who enables that. Because Obama's immigration policy was, come on in. We're not checking your ID. We're not checking your past. We're not checking to see whether you're a violent terrorist or not. Come on in. Everybody's welcome. We're not here to defend the people of the United States of America. We're here to help you. Joe Biden was vice president under that administration. Donald Trump, remember the whole debate over the wall? That was to put a stop to that. Well, in France, they didn't put a stop to it. So what happened? This is what you get. So Macron over there, the president over there, who was a leftist lunatic of his own, he started moving in a direction of sanity. And he stood up, and here's what he said. He said, Islam is a religion in crisis. That's what he said. And there was this blow-up outrage all across the world among Muslims who were calling for his death, the death of France. A leader in Pakistan, one of the elected leaders in Pakistan, called for Pakistan to use its nuclear weapons against France. Do you understand what I just said? Because a president of a country where this is going on said something as benign as Islam is a religion in crisis. Pakistan leaders were calling to nuke the entire country of France. Those are the kind of lunatics you're dealing with here. Minnesota voted for the party that supports that. How about with all the election, strange, odd things that happened in this election? Let's put it that way, since I'm not allowed by the censors, the Ministry of Truth here at YouTube, I'm not allowed to say what really happened. So all these oddities, strange things, votes kind of coming out of nowhere, people coming back from the dead just to vote and then going back to their graves, and all these things that happened. If Donald Trump remained in office, you can bet on one thing. Over the next 4 years, that would be fixed, and we would have free and fair elections going forward. With Joe Biden in office, I think you can figure out there isn't a chance in the hottest of hells that anything's going to be done to fix those election improprieties and to prevent them in the future. In fact, what you're going to see is the institutionalization of those things so that they will go on in the future, but only for the benefit of one political party. That is who Minnesota voted for. The people of Minnesota, the nicest, kindest, most neighborly, most charitable, well-educated, smartest, just greatest in all possible ways, better than you, better than me, by their own admission. That's what they voted for. Now, I mentioned before that Biden isn't going to last long as president. It's a virtual certainty. I don't have a crystal ball. Who knows? The guy might hobble his way through 4 years. I don't know. But looking at his inability to compose a sentence, looking at the way that he can get so distracted when he sees a small head that's worth sniffing, he'll be saying a sentence and then he's just... I mean, this guy, the leader of the free world, who's going to be carrying the nuclear football, who, if you look at the evidence, seems to be, shall we say, connected in certain ways, like a puppeteer is connected to his puppets with communist China. This guy is probably not going to last long, and then you're going to have President Harris, one of the meanest, nastiest, most immature people ever, zero experience, no qualifications whatsoever for having high public office, period, let alone the presidency, the leader of the free world. This is an adult child with no experience, no foreign policy experience, no concept of world history, no foggy idea of what's going on, what has gone on over the last 1,000 years between the Middle East, the Arabs, the Jews. No, doesn't even know any of it. It's not inside of her head. She doesn't have that knowledge at all. And she will likely become president when Biden gets taken out one way or another. That's who Minnesota voted for. That's what Minnesotans wanted. Let me ask you another question. Why is it that China, Iran, North Korea, and terrorist organizations all around the world, Venezuela, why is it that all of them want Joe Biden to be president? They don't want Donald Trump to be president. How much thinking does it really take for you to figure out, well, let's see, if these people are interested in exploiting us and taking advantage of us and stealing from us and taking us over and attacking us and dominating us, then the president who they want in office is probably the one who will make it easiest for them to steal from us, dominate us, take us over. Doesn't that make rational sense, or am I wrong? Am I wrong? Doesn't that make sense? If they want a certain president in office, it's because that president's going to make their life best. China, Iran, leading sponsor of terror in the world, North Korea, and terrorist organizations all want Joe Biden in office, and they actively do not want Donald Trump in office. Doesn't that tell you something right there? Minnesotans voted for Joe Biden for president. They wanted the same president that China wants. They wanted the same president that Iran wants. They wanted the same president that North Korea wants. They wanted the same president that all of these terrorist organizations want. Minnesotans. Not North Dakota, a couple miles away, not South Dakota, not Iowa. And even with all the stuff's going on in Wisconsin, if you look at the numbers there, you'll see what really happened in Wisconsin. Not even Wisconsin. Just this little block in Minnesota. And Minnesota, what I'm talking about Minnesota here, is just this tiny, itty-bitty couple of square miles in the Twin Cities who control Minnesota and Minnesota politics. They want the same leader that these countries who hate us want. Does that tell you anything about Minnesota? What about Antifa, this fake, ridiculous, just, only 20th century America could come up with a group that stupid. Antifa, okay, anti-fascist, but they don't even understand what fascism is, so they engage in fascism, and what they're fighting against are people who are against fascism. They're so dumb they even named their own organization wrong. What does Antifa think about this? Antifa, do they want Joe Biden in office or do they want Donald Trump in office? I'll tell you, because they've said so. They don't care. It doesn't matter. So if you voted for Joe Biden because you think Antifa's going to stop what they're doing, you got another thing coming, because Antifa all along has said, we could care less which one of these rich white guys you put in office. We couldn't care less. We hate every single one of them. We're going to keep starting fires and breaking glass and burning down your businesses and shooting people, no matter what. So if you voted for Biden because you're trying to stop Antifa, you blew it. You didn't pay attention. But here's the key. There's only one of these two candidates who was going to do anything about Antifa. And it wasn't the one that Minnesotans voted for. Minnesotans voted for the one who's going to do nothing about Antifa. That's what Minnesotans wanted for you and for me, and for their own children. This is how little they care about their own children. I talked about immigration a little bit, but I would just mention again, when you have immigration that has no checks and balances, that doesn't have any kind of there's no process. People just flood the country. You don't know who they are, what their capabilities are, what their intentions are. That's the definition of human stupidity. It's suicidal. We had a process for immigration that was meant to make sure that only people who are going to share our values and participate in our free democracy and build it up and make it even stronger, people, no matter where they came from, no matter what their religion is, no matter what their color is, they were going to come in and they were going to become part of this wonderful melting pot that we used to have. That's different than just dumping a bunch of who knows what all over the country, including people who want to destroy us. And people who don't want to work for a living, who would rather steal. Trump is the one who was trying to stop that. Minnesotans voted for the guy who wants that. Another thing you can expect if Joe Biden is inaugurated president on January 20th is a proliferation of these so-called fact checkers. Classic propaganda technique. Same thing anti-smokers did. Same thing. I mean, they in Minnesota, the smoking ban was called the Freedom to Breathe Act. See, it has the word freedom in there, even though it's the opposite of freedom. It's a ban. It's not freedom. It's the total opposite of freedom. 180 degrees opposite. People were free when they were allowed to smoke where they wanted, and other people could freely choose whether they went into this bar that allowed smoking or not. And this bar could freely choose whether they allowed smoking or not, because they owned the bar. That was freedom. But they come up with a ban, which is something where people come out with loaded guns and say, you can't do this in here anymore. Your ancestors could, but you can't, because this hate group says so. You will either come with me. If you resist, eventually I'm going to pull this trigger because you're resisting. All because you wanted to smoke a cigarette. And they call it the Freedom to Breathe Act. Nothing to do with freedom. Well, these fact checkers are the same thing. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry can call himself a fact checker. Are they really checking the facts? Or are you just believing them because it has the label fact checker there? Do you go to Snopes.com to get your information? There's a great place to get information. Snopes established themselves as the source of real truth long ago. The problem is, it isn't a very good source of real truth, is it? Just like Wikipedia. Folks, if Joe Biden is elected president on January 20, all these things I just mentioned that Minnesotans wanted to happen, terrorism to suddenly fire up again, everyone in Israel to suddenly live in terror and fear when they haven't had to for 4 years, just everything, mask mandates, the coronavirus health scare, all these things going, everything I just listed out is going to absolutely explode beginning on January 21st. And there's no end in sight because there's nobody to fix the elections process to put somebody in office later who will put a stop to it. That's who Minnesotans voted for. And I want to make this clear. Minnesotans voted for this without any hesitation at all. I was here. I wasn't allowed to vote. Minnesotans denied me my constitutional right to vote, but they were anxious. They're out there standing in line. They're going where they have to go to vote. They want to vote. Without hesitation, they wanted to vote for this. This is what they want for themselves. They want all the things I just described that are going to happen if Biden is inaugurated. They wanted that. That's the world they want to live in, where Iran has a nuclear bomb. They want that. Where all billions of dollars that could be spent helping people like me, American citizens who work hard and try to contribute to our country by making videos like this, among so many other things I do, instead of giving money or doing anything at all to help them, let's just send a bunch of cash over to the biggest sponsor of national terror in the world. That's what Minnesotans were voting for. This is what they want for their own children. And you've got to think long and hard about what that means. This is their children. This is their progeny going forward. This, what I just described, is what they actively want their children to live in that world. This is what they want for you. And this is what they want for your children. And this is what they want for your family, your progeny going forward. This is what Minnesotans want for you. They want a world where the biggest terrorist organization has a nuclear bomb. They want that. They voted for it. That's the proof. It's the proof. This is how dumbed down our society's gotten, that people don't see that as proof. They voted for it, so they obviously wanted it. Duh. This is what they want for the world that we live in. This is the end of civilization, folks. If you don't see what's going on here, if all these things start coming to pass as they were under Bush, or under Clinton and Bush and Obama, and they were just accelerating, and all of a sudden, Trump put the brakes on it and started reversing it. And these guys want to go back to it, and because of Trump, they are going to lock everything down so that we can never get a Trump in office ever again. They're going to make sure that never happens again. And that means that what Clintons and Bush and Obama with Biden were doing is just going to take off. This is what Minnesota voted for, that blue square in the center of a red country. This is what they want. With that in mind, I want to remind you that if you're considering moving to the state of Minnesota, think about this long and hard, because these people will be your neighbors who you rely upon every single day for your safety. As you're driving down the road, those are the people in the cars next to you. I'm in peril of my life every time I start moving this car around, because these kinds of people who vote for what I just described, you can imagine how those kinds of people drive. They're not exactly concerned with what is right versus what is wrong. They're not exactly concerned with what is legal or inconsistent with the law versus what is against the law. If you're thinking of moving to Minnesota, think about what these people voted for. If you're thinking about doing business with Minnesotans or people or companies based in Minnesota, think about what those people just wanted for our world. I'm going to give you a quick list of some of the companies based in Minnesota. These are Minnesota-based companies. In other words, this whole philosophy of everything that I just told you that they want for this world infiltrates these companies as well, because these are Minnesotans who run these companies. Cub Foods, Best Buy, Target, the Mayo Clinic, St. Jude, General Mills, Hormel, Cargill. Cargill is the largest privately held company in the United States by revenue. And yet, they chartered their corporation in Delaware because the laws and the rules and the taxes in Minnesota will destroy any business. It's the largest privately held company in the United States by revenue, and yet they have to charter in another state because the laws in Minnesota destroy businesses. Do you get it? Cargill is right down the road here. I have to pass by Cargill all the time, or at least this big Cargill area. These guys have these huge trucks, these big gas trucks, and they drive the things like they're in the Terminator. You know, in the Terminator, when he's in that big cryogenic truck with all the steam, smoke coming out of the back, and he's just driving it down the road, changing lanes and going twice the speed limit. That's how all these Cargill drivers drive. These Minnesotans who voted for everything I just described: a nuclear bomb for Iran, an end to freedom, a total institutionalization of censorship by private companies who are working with evil elements of the government. Those are the people driving these vehicles. I am at risk of my life every time I drive anywhere near Cargill. And it's because of the quality of the human beings inside those cars. They are Minnesotans. Dairy Queen. Need some ice cream? You might think about getting some other kind of ice cream. Dairy Queen is based in Edina, Minnesota. Ecolab. How about 3M? 3M, even in Minnesota, they have at least tried a couple times to stop 3M from polluting the environment. But they kind of just gave up on it. Not a big deal. We're going to worry about this fake climate change instead. Pollution doesn't mean anything, even though pollution is what's causing the problems in this world, including, most likely, a lot of these diseases that are attributed to so many other things, like cancers. 3M got away with it. 3M is a Minnesota-based company. The Mall of America. A life of shopping. Based near the airport in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. Ameriprise Financial. Oh, I'm not even going there. How about U.S. Bancorp, which is a parent company of U.S. Bank? You know, when I had to get a new account because Wells Fargo screwed me over here, I went into the U.S. Bank right over there, about a quarter of a mile away. I went into the U.S. Bank and I was just telling them, look, I need to start a bank account, but I don't have an address. And, you know, within my first couple of sentences, I had to mention, I don't have an address. I live in my car. What happened was the woman there, this nice, dressed up, professional Minnesotan, like a switch, you know, she was all, oh, hi, all this, oh, yeah, you betcha. And as soon as it came out of my mouth that I didn't have an address and I lived in my car, like a switch, she got this horrible frown on her face, and she got nasty with me. She got really snippy. We're not going to have an account for you. We don't have anything for you. If you don't have an address, we don't have anything for you. And as I tried to push it, she started raising her voice. I mean, she was obviously getting to the point where, I mean, this is all happening in probably less than 90 seconds. It wasn't like I'm standing there fighting this battle. She just went hot-headed that quickly, all because she heard that I lived in my car. The switch. That was the U.S. Bank. U.S. Bancorp is based in the state of Minnesota. Coincidence? Or are these just the kinds of people who are like that? Bad, rotten people. How about Sleep Number? Have you ever listened to this horrible, just pretentious, god-awful, not funny at all radio show, A Prairie Home Companion, with Garrison Keillor always hawking these Sleep Number beds, based in Minnesota. Gee, what a shock. He's hawking the products of a company based in Minnesota. Wow. It's almost like there's a good old boy buddy-buddy system going on here, isn't there? Outsiders aren't allowed in, though. How about Anytime Fitness, based in Minnesota? Minnesota Public Radio, which is the archetype, in my opinion, of what NPR is and why NPR is such a bad thing for this country, and always has been. Minnesota Vikings, a bunch of guys from other states who come in here and get all the loyalty of stupid people in this state who can't figure out that these guys who make millions of dollars to throw a ball around aren't even from Minnesota, and they couldn't care less about Minnesota. Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, I got to keep this video under 4 hours or so. I don't know. Let's see, how far are we here? 1 hour. I'm going to end this. Folks, if you're thinking of moving to Minnesota, if you're thinking of doing any business with Minnesota or Minnesota-based companies, if you're thinking of dating a Minnesotan, for heaven's sakes, protect yourselves. I'm not making these videos to lash out against a state. Why would I want to do that? The problem is, my situation has demonstrated what is really, truly wrong in the real world with this state. And the state is a bunch of people. It's not the land. Minnesota is a bunch of people. It's not the land and the air and the trees. It's the people. Particularly the people in the Twin Cities area who dominate the way that Minnesota functions. I've said it all along, and I didn't expect this when I moved here. When I moved here, I was so happy and excited to move to Minnesota. I thought I was moving to the Midwest where it was going to be good, wonderful people. And over 14 years, I have had to progressively be introduced to the reality of the situation. These are bad, evil people, and Minnesota resembles more than any place I've ever been in my life a portal to hell itself. And they voted for all of the things I just described in this video. Think about that before having anything to do with Minnesota or Minnesotans. Or are you going to disregard everything I've said here and demonstrated, proven in my other videos, And are you just going to say, well, I heard on the TV that Minnesotans are really nice and friendly, so I'm just going to believe that instead? Which is it going to be? It's up to you. They've already condemned us to the future I just described, unless a miracle happens in the next couple weeks. Anyway, now you know the truth about Minnesota. Whether you believe it or not, that's up to you. Thank you for watching.